So we've got this 260 swather, had a freeze plug leaking. It's been leaking basically since the day that I bought it. It was just barely dripping and it just kind of progressively been getting worse. So we got a new one. I just popped this old one out and we're gonna put this anaerobic flange sealant on there, gasket maker. This is very important to put on these. I don't use silicone or anything else. This stuff here, it stays soft and it only seals where the pressure is at. So on the inside of this, where there's no pressure, the coolant will just wash this stuff away and it won't be a big glob of crap in there. And on the outside as well, we can just wipe it off after it's dried and sealed up. We can just clean up our whatever was left on that stuff. So we're gonna give this a shot. You just put a bunch around the edge and then take a socket that's not quite the same size as the inside diameter, because he's basically got to smash down, and you just knock these plugs in using I just use a socket or a piece of pipe or something that you can just fit on the inside of this. Anything that doesn't quite fit the whole inside, because you don't want it to pinch down on the socket or whatever you're using. And always be generous with this stuff. So once we get that, we can set that right there. Let's take a little more of this. Okay, so that's in there. Should be able to hopefully knock this thing in. I don't do very many of these freeze plugs, so I'll be able to do this without losing a bunch of our gasket maker. So try to get it started in there as flush as you can. When you take your socket, okay, it's like so. That's how you put a freeze plug in. We're on the old H8080 now. This puppy's got 2,626 hours on it, just changed the oil. We're redoing the belt drive on this guy. You can see the serpentine belt was starting to get pretty chewed up. This is the original belt on this swather. Original pulleys. I did change the tensioner once. But we're replacing all of the idler pulleys because they're starting to look like that. That's the one that's going to replace that one. You can see starting to get pretty ate down. And what ends up happening is the belt can break. I had this happen on my 240 last year. The belt broke, ended up coming down and cutting through this harness when it smacked around, and it cut through this harness for this PCM. So we had to replace the whole harness on the swather. So I just don't want that to happen on this one. So I seen that belt was split, so we're gonna go through and we're gonna replace all the idler pulleys and the belt tensioner and the belt, and then we're gonna go ahead and replace that AC belt and tensioner pulley and whatnot on there. You have to pull the fan off in order to get that belt off. So we're gonna go ahead and do all that and get this machine good to go. We're servicing it, and then I got to go through and put new bushings in the lift linkage. It's starting to get kind of sloppy, so we're gonna put new pins in the back, new bushings back there, and then the new spacers in the lift cylinder linkage as well. Tighten this thing all up and get it serviced up. Check it for any leaks. I don't think it has any, except for right here it was leaking a little fuel, so I might replace this fuel line. I don't know if it was in this O-ring deal. I got the O-rings to replace in here, or this hose, so we're gonna replace that when we do the filters and whatnot, and check this thing over and get it ready to rock and roll for the year.
Put your back in it. What'd you do?
All right, so these guys are putting this ram back on. Just got done resealing it. It was leaking out of the seal down here, but we went ahead and pulled it apart and resealed the whole cylinder ram. Got the lift linkage off on both sides. We're gonna put new bushings and pins. These pins got some major wear in them, and the bushings in those arms there. Get ready to put those in, knock those out, put new ones in it. We're gonna put new bushings in these ends of these cylinder rams, and get all the lift linkage on the old 8080 done. Earlier today we got all the new tensioners and whatnot on there. Drain the coolant and change the coolant on it. Put new belts on it. Change the oil, change all the filters. Getting ready to start draining the planetary oil and whatnot next. Change the planetary oil. And that's about where we're at on that one. We got the, over on the 260, just put new cab shocks and or struts on this, on both sides. Stabilized the cab out, filled it full of coolant, ran it. Made sure everything was gonna be A-okay with no leaks on our freeze plug that we had to replace. But that all came out good. Got the shock, or the strut on this side as well. So that's all basically pretty well done. We're still waiting on our pods for the One Direction to get this header finished up, but this header's basically done, minus the One Direction of pods. They're stuck somewhere in between here and Indiana or some damn thing. So still waiting on those to show up, but get that done and this swather will be basically good to go. Got our new chain on this side. We replaced the chain. This has got a pretty new belt on it. I only replace those when they start slipping, but everything on this is basically ready to rock and roll.